One forgotten man inherited a ruin, but it was the dog who heard the truth first. While his family laughed and the world passed by, a retired K9 stood still at the broken steps of an old mansion, nose twitching, tail stiff. Beneath rotting floorboards and whispering walls, something called to him. Not gold, not glory, but justice. No one else saw the cracks in history. No one else followed the map carved in time. But he did. And what he uncovered led them to a $200 million secret, a century-old injustice, and a second chance at legacy. This is the story of a loyal dog, a grieving father, and two brave children who fought to turn a forgotten ruin into something worth fighting for. Before we begin, tap like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell, because some stories don't just entertain, they awaken. The town of Cedar Hill didn't look like much under the gray veil of late October. Cold winds swept through its narrow streets, rattling faded signs and nudging fallen leaves across cracked sidewalks. The maples had already turned, their fiery red and orange crowns stripped bare by an early frost. On the edge of town, past the rusted train tracks and a cemetery so old its stones leaned like tired soldiers, sat the Holloway family's newly inherited curse, a mansion, if it could still be called that. Rain had been falling steadily for 2 days. Cold, not quite freezing, but relentless. It painted everything in Cedar Hill with a coat of damp sorrow, and when Ben Holloway stepped out of his battered pickup truck, the soles of his boots squelched in the mud. He stood there a moment, jaw tight, shoulders squared like a man waiting for a punch. Ben was 48, worn down by years of quiet disappointments. Tall but slightly hunched, his frame carried the fatigue of someone who had spent most of his life standing in front of chalkboards and cafeteria lines. First as a soldier, then a teacher, then just a father with more bills than paychecks. His brown hair had faded at the temples, and his square jaw was dusted with a beard he hadn't trimmed in a week. There was kindness in his eyes, but also the dull edge of grief. Behind him, the passenger door creaked open. Liam Holloway stepped out with a sigh that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. At 17, Liam was lean and sharp, dark hair, always a little messy, olive-toned skin inherited from their late mother, and eyes that had learned early to expect very little. He was a logical boy, more numbers than dreams. "This is it?" he said, kicking at a clump of wet leaves. "Looks like a haunted postcard." "Better than a tent," Ben muttered. From the back seat, Emma Holloway clambered out, hugging a sketchbook to her chest. She was 12, small for her age, with freckled cheeks and honey-blonde hair tied in a messy braid. Her clothes were a patchwork of second-hand and hand-me-downs, but her boots were sturdy, and her eyes carried the stubborn sparkle of someone who hadn't given up yet. "It's huge," she whispered, her breath fogging. "It's like something out of a storybook." Ben didn't respond. He just looked up at the house. 3 stories of sagging eaves, broken windows, and peeling paint. Ivy had overtaken half the walls, climbing like silent fingers toward the rotting rooftop. A demolition notice, soaked and curled at the edges, hung from one rusted iron gate. Then came the low growl. From the truck bed, a shape shifted under a tarp. A moment later, Valor emerged, an aging German shepherd with a black and tan coat, faded by years of service and sun. His left ear was nicked, and his eyes were mismatched, one deep amber, the other clouded gray from an old injury. Valor moved slowly but deliberately, joints stiff from both time and scars. He was a retired K9, a dog who had once chased down bombs and men alike, but now followed only one man and guarded one family. He sniffed the air, ears pricked. "Easy, boy," Ben said, kneeling beside him. Valor didn't respond. His tail lowered, and his growl deepened as he trotted toward the porch. Then he paused, nose pointed toward the side wall of the house, and began to scratch frantically at the warped wood. "What's he doing?" Emma asked. Ben stood, staring. "I don't know, but he smells something." Rain tapped on his jacket. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if shaking off the ghosts of uncertainty, Ben reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a brass key the lawyer had mailed him, and stepped forward. The door groaned open like it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and memories. Dust floated in shafts of gray light slicing through broken windows. The foyer had once been grand. Now it sagged with tired bones. A chandelier, half its crystals missing, swayed gently in the draft. A staircase curved upward with faded grace, its mahogany rail dulled but intact. Liam followed, muttering, "We're definitely all going to die of tetanus." Emma, on the other hand, twirled slowly in place, eyes wide. "This place is sad," she said quietly, "but it's kind of beautiful, too." Ben ran a hand over the banister. "Your great-uncle Daniel didn't keep it up, but it's ours now." The words came out flatter than he meant. He didn't say the rest. That his own sister had laughed when she heard. That his ex-brother-in-law offered him $5,000 just to walk away from it. That his father had shaken his head, disappointed, again. Ben had been the black sheep for years, first when he quit law school to join the army, then again when he left the army to raise his kids alone, and finally, when he took substitute teaching jobs instead of selling insurance or running someone else's business. They all thought this house was another failure waiting to happen, another bad decision from the man who never got it right. But Valor didn't think so. The dog stood in the doorway, still staring at the same section of wall. He barked once, short and sharp, then sat, ears still alert. Ben walked over and pressed his palm to the damp, crumbling boards. Something about it felt wrong. Too hollow. Too cold. He closed his eyes, and suddenly another voice echoed in his memory. It was Ethan Holloway, Ben's older brother, a man of iron will and quick humor, once a legend in their hometown. Ethan had been tall and broad-shouldered, with jet-black hair and steel-gray eyes that rarely blinked first. He had joined the military straight out of high school, served in classified K-9 units, and never really came back. Not fully. After 2 tours and 1 unspeakable mission, Ethan returned haunted. He spoke less, drank more, and only seemed at peace when Valor was by his side. Ethan had died 6 years ago. The official report said it was an accident. Ben had never believed it. Valor was his partner, Ben whispered, more to himself than to the children. Maybe he remembers something. Liam tilted his head. "You think there's something behind the wall?" Emma had already begun sketching. "If there is," she said, eyes never leaving the page, "it's waiting." Ben took a long breath and looked at the old house again. A ruin, yes, but not empty, not meaningless. He crouched beside Valor and scratched behind the dog's ear. "We'll find out what's hiding in there," he murmured. "Won't we, boy?" Valor didn't wag his tail, but he didn't look away either. The next morning brought with it a pale, brittle light that filtered weakly through the torn curtains of Hartwell House. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and damp, and a lingering scent of wet wood and forgotten years filled every hallway. The Holloway family had spent their first night in the mansion, huddled in the drawing room, sleeping in sleeping bags atop a tarp spread across the dusty floor. The fireplace had coughed smoke before it roared reluctantly to life, and Valor, curled near the hearth, had remained awake long into the night, ears twitching, nose constantly sniffing the air like it remembered too much. Ben awoke with a sore neck and a sense of rising dread. He glanced over at his children, Liam still asleep with a hand over his eyes, and Emma already sketching the ceiling with sleepy focus. "You drawing cobwebs now?" Ben asked, his voice dry. "They have a pattern," she murmured. "Everything in this house seems to." As Ben stretched and pushed himself up, he caught sight of Valor sitting beside the kitchen entrance, staring again at the far wall, the same one he had scratched at yesterday. The dog's posture was alert, and his nose was twitching. Ben didn't say anything, just watched. The kitchen was their next target. If they wanted to stay more than a day or two, they needed clean water and something better than canned chili. The kitchen had once been elegant. You could see it in the ornate tilework now buried beneath grime, and the wide windows that overlooked what had once been a herb garden, now strangled in vines. Ben started peeling away the layers of mold-stained wallpaper. It came off reluctantly, bringing flakes of old plaster with it. Behind one torn strip, a set of carved markings emerged, sharp, deliberate, etched directly into the wood beneath. "Dad," Emma said, standing up suddenly and crossing to him, "that's not just damage." Liam, now awake and rubbing his eyes, leaned over too. "That's some kind of design, like symbols, or a map." The carvings were shallow but precise. Spirals and intersecting lines, small arrows, and something that resembled a compass rose. The symbols wrapped around a central circle with a shape that looked almost like an eye, surrounded by a sequence of numbers that didn't immediately make sense. Valor was right, Ben muttered. He knew this was important. The dog sat down beside them, tail resting flat against the floor, eyes fixed on the strange markings. He let out a quiet huff. "Get your sketchbook," Ben told Emma. "Draw this exactly. Liam, see what you can find about the house. Anything about symbols. Or whoever owned this place before Uncle Daniel." The next few hours passed in a strange, focused silence. Emma, perched on a stool with knees tucked up, sketched furiously. Liam took out his old laptop, held together with duct tape and stubbornness, and began searching online through public records and local history archives. Meanwhile, Ben continued peeling away wallpaper, revealing more symbols scattered around the kitchen walls like breadcrumbs left by a forgotten architect. They weren't random. There was a pattern. That was when someone knocked on the front door. Ben answered it with a cautious hand still dusted in plaster. An elderly woman stood on the porch, wrapped in a thick navy coat, her graying hair tucked beneath a wool cap. She had sharp blue eyes, a rigid posture, and a cane with a carved wolf's head. "You must be Ben Holloway," she said. Her voice was gravelly but firm. "I'm Florence Grady. Lived next door for 40 years. Ben offered a cautious smile. "Well, Miss Grady, you probably know more about this place than I do. I knew your Uncle Daniel. Not well, mind you. He kept to himself. But your brother?" Her voice trailed, her face softening. "Ethan." Now there was a man. Ben's body went still. "You knew Ethan?" Florence nodded. "He came here often. Never told me much, but I saw him walking the perimeter at night. Always with that same dog. I remember him pacing by the east wall, like he was looking for something." Ben glanced over his shoulder at Valor. The dog sat by the fireplace again, but his ears had perked at the sound of Florence's voice. "Did he ever say what he was doing here?" Ben asked. "Just that he didn't believe what people said about the Hartwells," Florence replied. "That they ran away in shame. He said something was off. That maybe someone wanted them gone." Ben swallowed. "Isaac R. Hartwell, right?" Florence's eyebrows rose. "So he told you?" "No, my son just found a record. The owner before Daniel disappeared in 1930. Florence leaned on her cane. "That wasn't just a disappearance, Mr. Holloway. That was a scandal. Isaac Hartwell was accused of embezzling from his own company, but the evidence was shaky. Then his entire family vanished. It broke this town's back. No one wanted to talk about it after." Ben exhaled slowly. "Do you know where I can find more about that?" Florence tapped the cane once. "Milton Library, old newspapers and town ledgers. But they won't give it to just anyone. Say your family. That'll open doors." Before she turned to leave, she looked down at Valor. "That dog hasn't aged a day in his heart, has he? Still waiting to finish the job." She left Ben standing there in the cold. Back inside, Liam looked up from his laptop. "I think I found something," he said. "There's a journal article from 1989. Some historian mentioned Isaac Hartwell as a possible whistleblower, someone who was about to expose corruption in the railway industry before he vanished." Ben sat down hard on a chair. So Ethan might have been right, and maybe he died trying to prove it. Emma, flipping through her sketches, nodded toward the wall. "And these markings? They're leading somewhere." As evening fell again over Cedar Hill, the Holloways gathered around the worn dining table, now cleared of dust and old cutlery. Ben looked at his children, Emma radiant with focus, Liam burning with questions, and Valor, who stood beside the wall once more, still watching. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't just a house. It was a message, a map, and Ethan had known it too. They would follow the markings. They would learn what Ethan had started, and they would uncover what truly happened in 1930. Night fell like ink across Cedar Hill, seeping into the cracks of Hartwell House, turning its broken windows into mirrors and its crooked halls into whispers. In the kitchen, a single lantern flickered on the counter, casting amber light across the carved symbols now fully exposed. The Holloways sat in a rough semicircle, sketchbooks and notes scattered before them. Ben tapped his fingers against the table, his mind churning over the pieces they had uncovered. Valor lay beside Emma, his head resting on her foot, ears twitching as if he, too, was listening for something ancient and unfinished. "Look at this pattern," Emma said. flipping to a page she'd shaded in carefully. This spiral wraps around the compass mark and ends in a straight line. If I overlay it on the floor plan. She shifted papers until the drawing matched the house's ground floor. The symbols didn't align with rooms. They aligned with blank spaces. Spaces where there should have been something, but wasn't. "I think this is a map," she said. "A hidden one." Liam leaned closer, running a pencil along the edge of the page. "There's nothing here on the blueprints. I checked the town records, but this..." He circled a section near the edge of the property. "This could be underground." Ben nodded slowly. "Cellar, maybe, or a sealed basement. Uncle Daniel never mentioned anything about it." Valor suddenly lifted his head, growled low, and padded toward the wall beneath the staircase. He scratched once, then twice. His hackles raised slightly. Ben moved to join him, tapping on the plaster. It echoed differently. Thicker, hollow. He knelt, pushing aside a warped baseboard, and there it was. An iron ring embedded in the floorboards, hidden beneath a thin panel of wood. He pulled. The panel creaked, resisted, then gave way. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. It wasn't listed on any official drawing. No one had mentioned it. No light, no wiring. Just stone steps and the smell of earth and rust. Liam handed Ben a flashlight. "You're not going alone." Ben gave a wry smile. "I wasn't planning to." He went first, followed by Liam, then Emma, and Valor bringing up the rear with a quiet determination. The basement stretched out like a forgotten lung beneath the house. Stone walls, damp floor, and the faint sound of dripping water echoing from somewhere deeper. They moved cautiously, the flashlight's beam bouncing across spiderwebs and old crates. Then Valor barked sharply and ran toward a far wall. There, beside a pile of firewood, half buried in dirt and rotting leaves, was a rusted metal box. Ben cleared debris from its top and pried it open with a crowbar. Inside was an object wrapped in canvas. He unrolled it gently and revealed a small iron plaque, its surface embossed with strange geometric lines and a faded military insignia, an eagle clutching a bundle of arrows. Liam squinted. "That's pre-WWII, maybe earlier. It's definitely military." "Ethan would have known," Ben said quietly, brushing dust from the engraving. This looks like the old U.S. Signal Corps emblem." Emma gently touched the edge. "There's something scratched underneath." She read aloud. "Vindication lies below the garden." Ben blinked. "Vindication?" The word rang in his mind like a chime. Emma rifled through her sketchbook and pulled a folded envelope from the inside pocket. "I found this upstairs yesterday," she said. "It was in the back of a closet, wedged behind a rafter. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure it was from him." She handed Ben the letter. The handwriting was immediately familiar, cramped, angled, and always in black ink. It was Ethan's. "Ben, if you're reading this, you've probably already found something." "Good. This place is more than a mausoleum of guilt and ivy. I think Isaac Hartwell left behind more than money. I think he left a truth no one wanted found. I've followed pieces of it, symbols, letters, military contacts, but it all points to one phrase: Vault of Vindication. Find it, and you'll understand what really happened in 1930. I couldn't finish it in time, but maybe you can." Ben held the letter to his chest. The air felt heavier, but not in a bad way. It felt expectant. "We have to keep looking," Emma said. "There's something beneath the garden. That's probably what this map is pointing to." Upstairs, the silence of the house was broken by a knock on the front door. Ben emerged from the basement cautiously, his flashlight still in hand, and opened the door to find a man in a dark gray peacoat and tailored slacks standing on the porch. He was in his early 50s, tall, lean, with skin the color of aged copper and close-cropped silver hair. His jaw was sharply cut, and his posture screamed corporate discipline. "Mr. Holloway?" the man asked. His voice was smooth, practiced. "I hope I'm not intruding." "That depends," Ben replied, stepping outside and letting the door close behind him. "I'm Nathan Vexley," the man said, extending a gloved hand. "I represent Hawthorne Development Group. We're a historical restoration and property acquisition firm." Ben didn't shake his hand. "We're not selling." "Of course," Vexley said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "But we understand Hartwell House has some unique challenges. Municipal code violations. structural damage, possibly hazardous conditions. That can create pressure. Ben crossed his arms. What are you offering? Vexley produced a sleek black folder. Inside was a document marked Confidential Purchase Proposal. The offer, $225,000 in cash. As is. No inspection, no conditions. You want this ruin? Ben asked, surprised despite himself. We want to preserve history, Vexley replied smoothly, and this land, and remove potential burdens from local families. Ben stared at the man, who didn't blink. Thanks, he said, but we're not interested. Vexley's expression didn't change, but his tone cooled. Just be cautious, Mr. Holloway. Old houses like this, they tend to collapse on top of people who hold on too tightly. He turned and left, his polished black shoes crunching down the gravel path toward a black town car parked at the edge of the drive. Ben returned inside, holding the offer letter. He didn't show it to the kids. Instead, he tucked it into a drawer beside Ethan's envelope. That night, after the kids were asleep, Ben stood in the kitchen staring at the wall. He whispered the name out loud. Vault of Vindication. Behind him, Valor exhaled through his nose and sat beside the wall again, ears up, watching. Whatever was buried here, it wasn't just about gold or land. It was something someone wanted forgotten, and Ethan had died trying to bring it to light. But Ben wasn't going to let it stay buried. A cold wind rattled the windows of Hartwell House as morning settled in, casting long golden beams through the broken shutters of the library. Dust hung in the air like memory itself, and the fire in the hearth, newly kindled by Ben, sputtered as if reluctant to warm a room that had seen too much. Books leaned in sagging rows on the warped shelves, histories forgotten, ledgers rotted, spines curled like paper ghosts. Ben stood with one hand on the mantel, staring into the flames. The note from Ethan, the iron plaque, the strange military symbols. They were beginning to coalesce into something more than just folklore, something concrete, and Valor knew it. The dog, ever watchful, ever deliberate, had refused to leave the library that morning. While Liam brewed instant coffee and Emma examined the old garden through the frosted window panes, Valor paced in slow arcs around the hearth. His ears would prick, then flatten. His tail swept low. Finally, he sat and let out a short, deliberate bark, his eyes fixed on the base of the fireplace. Ben raised an eyebrow. What is it now, old friend? Emma joined them, notebook in hand, her pencil tucked behind her ear. He's found something again. Same posture as when he found the basement hatch. Liam crouched beside the hearth, brushing aside layers of soot and loose stone with a gloved hand. There's something back here. He tapped gently. Hollow. This isn't solid brick. Ben fetched a crowbar from the toolbox and worked carefully at the edge of the hearth's left side. After a tense few minutes, a loose panel shifted with a groan of age and dust. Behind it was a recessed stone block marked with the same spiral and compass engraving from the kitchen wall. A second later, with a click and a heavy rumble, part of the fireplace swung inward like a vault door. Behind the hearth was a narrow stair descending into another hidden chamber. The air that rushed up was stale, tinged with mold, but beneath it, unmistakable, paper, oil, and iron. Flashlights illuminated the descent. The chamber below was a cramped stone cellar, but unlike the disused basement, this one had been preserved. A heavy steel filing cabinet leaned against one wall, its drawers labeled by year. An oil lamp, still mounted on a bracket, flickered to life when Liam carefully lit the wick. "What is this place?" Emma whispered. Ben moved to the center of the room, where a desk sat covered with wax-sealed folders, faded newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. On the desk was an old phonograph with a cracked wooden base, and beside it, a leather-bound journal with Isaac R. Hartwell embossed in gold. Ben opened the journal. The handwriting was slanted but forceful, each letter pressed deeply into the page. January 14th, 1929. I warned them. The ledger discrepancies at Wilkins Freight were not clerical errors. They were siphons. Someone is bleeding the company through shell contracts. I brought it to the board. They threatened me. 2 days later, I was accused of theft. I know this was planted, but I won't run. I will document everything here. If they take me, may this truth remain. Liam opened the filing cabinet. There are dozens of folders, documents, names, companies, bank transfers. This is proof. Emma picked up a thin reel of phonograph record from a wooden box and held it up to the flickering light. It's labeled March 1929. Ben lifted the cover of the phonograph and cranked the handle until it clicked, then gently placed the disc. Static crackled, then a voice, measured, clear, trembling only slightly, filled the air. This is Isaac Hartwell. If you are hearing this, I am either dead or erased. The names in these files belong to men who profited from ruin, men who took bread from children's mouths and called it business. I will not beg history to remember me, but I beg you, whoever finds this, finish what I could not. The recording ended in a soft mechanical whir. Emma swallowed hard. He knew. Ben tightened his jaw. He was silenced because he told the truth. In the far corner of the room, Emma found a fragment of a map, torn at the edges but bearing a similar design to the earlier wall etchings. This one clearly marked a location titled VV, Vault of Vindication, with coordinates partially legible and a sketch of the garden above it. Liam photographed everything. Ben packed the journal and map fragment into a waterproof satchel. Valor lay down beside the open door, eyes half-lidded, ears alert. They knew someone would come looking soon, and someone already had. The next morning, Ben received a legal notice in his mailbox, hand-delivered, not mailed. The envelope bore the stamp of the County Development Oversight Board, though Ben doubted the sender had any noble purpose. The letter claimed that Hartwell House, due to its deteriorating condition and uninspected modifications, had been flagged for emergency review. Unless Ben could provide updated zoning certificates, repair plans, and proof of habitable living conditions within 7 days, the property could be seized under Public Safety Ordinance 311B. "What the hell is Ordinance 311B?" Liam asked, his face tight with disbelief. "It's real," Ben muttered, "but it's rarely used. Only when someone wants to fast-track a seizure." Emma stared at the document, then at her father. "Do you think this is from that man, Vexley?" "Absolutely," Ben said. "They couldn't buy us out. Now they're trying to crush us legally." "But they don't know what we've found," Liam said. "If this goes public—" Ben shook his head. "Not yet. We don't have the full picture. If we go out with half the truth, they'll bury us before we can reach the rest." "We need to find the vault," Emma said, "before they shut us down." Ben looked toward the library, where the secret door remained slightly ajar. The truth was buried here. Ethan had died believing it mattered. Isaac Hartwell had died trying to protect it. And now, the responsibility had passed to them. The morning broke sullen and gray, mist clinging to the grounds of Hartwell House, like a breath that refused to leave. The garden, once overgrown with weeds and brambles, was now stripped of its wildness. The family had cleared it days ago, following the fragmented map found beneath the hearth. Stone paths long buried under moss had been unearthed, revealing the skeleton of something intentional, architectural. A space that once held meaning. Ben stood with a spade in hand, the air biting at his cheeks. His jaw was tense, eyes scanning the cracked paving stones. Emma knelt beside a sketch pad, gloved fingers smudged with graphite. She was redrawing the map, overlaying the house's structural plan with the old spiral symbols and Hartwell's cryptic coordinates. Liam, nearby, was using his phone to drone scan the area, mapping elevation shifts in the garden's layout. Beside them, Valor paced in slow, deliberate circles, nose to the ground, tail rigid. Then he stopped. A low, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest. He pawed at a crooked slab near the sundial. Ben rushed over, knelt, and brushed away the frost. Beneath the slab was a rust-colored metal plate, covered in a thick layer of mud. Valor began digging furiously. The plate gave way to a wooden hatch, dry-rotted but still intact. Ben and Liam hauled it open. Below was a stone shaft leading into darkness, an old access tunnel barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. "This wasn't built as storage," Liam muttered. "This was meant to be hidden." They lowered a flashlight down. The tunnel descended at a steep angle, curving under the garden. Valor whined impatiently, pawing at the edge. "Hold on, big guy," Ben said. "I'm not letting you go alone this time." The crawl was narrow, damp, and lined with bricks. After 15 feet, it widened into a small earthen chamber, the floor still solid after all these decades. In the center was a rusted box wrapped in cloth, and beside it, a tarnished military dog tag. Ben froze. He picked up the tag slowly. Holloway, Ethan J., K-9 Unit, 7th Army, U.S. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just a remnant. It was his brother's. Liam and Emma stood behind him, silent. The box creaked as he opened it. Inside lay a set of weathered documents wrapped in oilskin. There was a letter, with handwriting unmistakably Ethan's. Ben. If you're reading this, then you followed where I could not finish. I left Valor with you because he remembers. He knows what I found here, what they didn't want exposed. The man behind this, behind Isaac's ruin and my silence, is Thomas W. Vexley, grandfather of Nathan Vexley. The one you met, I'm sure. His family built an empire on stolen names and buried truth. This box is proof. Do not let them erase Hartwell twice. Beneath the letter were photographs, faded but clear. One showed a bank record connecting Wilkins Freight, the company Isaac had exposed, to Vexley Holdings, a paper shell tied to Thomas W. Vexley. Another was a list of land transfers, all funneled through dummy trusts, Hartwell's estate among them. The evidence was clear. Hartwell had been framed to protect the foundation of a corrupt fortune, and Ethan had been silenced when he got too close. Ben stood frozen in that chamber for several minutes, Ethan's letter trembling in his hands. Valor sat at his side, head tilted, a low whimper escaping his throat. Later that day, Emma took over. In her room upstairs, she scanned every document and photo, uploading them into a shared drive. She laid out the story piece by piece on her art tablet, crafting an infographic. The Hartwell family, Isaac's investigation, the forged charges, Ethan's death, and now the modern link to Hawthorne development. She titled it, Buried Legacy, the story they tried to erase. She posted it across every platform she could. Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. She used hashtags like #HartwellTruth, #ValorKnows, and #JusticeForIsaac. The response was immediate. Dozens, then hundreds of shares. Comments flooded in. This needs to go viral. They can't bury this. Who's Vexley? Local journalists began reaching out for interviews. One even showed up in a muddy Subaru that evening. Sarah Longley, a woman in her 40s with sun-worn skin, crow's feet from years squinting at truth, and a sharp tongue sharpened further by a decade of being dismissed by her male colleagues. She wore a battered corduroy jacket, jeans with notebook-stuffed pockets, and her gray-streaked auburn hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid. She introduced herself with a curt nod and a battered press badge. "Been covering corruption for 15 years, she said. "No one's ever had the guts to name the Vexleys. You sure about this?" Ben laid the photographs on the dining table. "I'm not just sure," he said. "I'm living in the house they tried to erase." She gave him a slow, assessing nod. "Then let's make them regret it." Meanwhile, Emma's post caught the attention of a pro bono legal group, Citizens for Historical Justice, who messaged Ben offering free legal counsel and preservation expertise. They warned that Vexley might now attempt more aggressive tactics, but also confirmed that if the evidence was strong enough, a federal inquiry could be requested. By midnight, a video Emma posted showing Valor scratching at the stone and Ben unearthing Ethan's dog tag had been viewed over 60,000 times. The tide had begun to turn. The fog rolled in low across Cedar Hill that morning, heavy and damp, like a veil cast over the truth just as it was about to be revealed. Hartwell House stood solemn and unyielding at the crest of the hill, its ivy-covered walls groaning quietly in the wind. Birds had stopped nesting on its ledges, as if they sensed something was coming. Ben adjusted the strap of his satchel as he stepped outside. Emma and Liam were already waiting in the garden, bundled in jackets, flashlights in hand. Valor stood between them, ears up, his body humming with alertness. His muzzle was speckled with gray, but his eyes were sharp, burning with instinct. Last night, they had pieced together the final section of Isaac's fragmented map. One Ethan had apparently hidden deep within the folds of the letter they found. Emma had scanned and realigned the corners digitally. When overlaid against the layout of the garden and the surrounding trees, the map revealed a symbol etched into the base of an old iron fountain in the far southwest corner of the grounds, one they'd barely noticed before. The fountain itself was dry and broken, its cherub statues headless, its basin filled with brown leaves and rusted tools. Liam pried up the stone slab at its base, revealing a hatch locked with an antique, rust-covered wheel lock. Ben leaned in, his breath misting over the metal. "Moment of truth," he muttered, turning the wheel. It groaned, then clicked. The hatch creaked open, revealing a steep spiral staircase descending into darkness. Ben went first, Valor right behind him. The others followed silently. The air inside was cold and dry, unnaturally so, as if it had been sealed perfectly for decades. The steps opened into a vaulted chamber unlike any they'd found before. Vaulted stone ceilings, arched pillars, and walls lined with sealed metal drawers and wooden crates, many stamped with the Hartwell family crest. In the center of the room stood a steel cabinet bolted to the ground, flanked by 2 glass cases filled with ledgers and hardbound journals. In front of it sat a table with several ornate lockboxes, each bearing numbers corresponding to specific years: 1927, 1928, 1929. Liam exhaled slowly. "This is it. This is the vault." Emma moved to the ledgers, flipping open one marked Deposits 1928, 1929. Inside were lists of transactions and wire transfers, all meticulously logged, stamped, and countersigned by Isaac Hartwell. Each ledger had annotations in the margins: names, questions, warnings. One page was earmarked with the words, "Do not trust TV." "TV," Ben whispered. "Thomas Vexley." Ben opened the steel cabinet. Inside were bound stacks of share certificates, ownership in steel, rail, lumber, and early telecommunications firms, now worth millions. Stashed alongside them were personal journals, including one entry that caught his eye immediately: July 1930. "They say I falsified the accounts. I gave them proof to the contrary, but no court will hear me. The press has been paid off. My wife has fled to her sister's. I am not ruined. I am buried. But I will leave this behind for someone braver than I." Ben's hands trembled slightly. He was planning for this. He knew he wouldn't survive it. Then Valor let out a short bark and turned to a crate in the far right corner. Liam opened it slowly, revealing reel-to-reel tapes labeled with dates and initials. Tucked underneath them was a sealed envelope addressed in faded ink, "To the Holloway family, for when it matters most." Ben slid it open and read silently. It was from Isaac Hartwell, but it had been placed there by Ethan. At the bottom was a note from the Army Office of Records, sealed and stamped with official insignia. Emma and Liam leaned in. Ben spoke aloud. "We confirm that Staff Sergeant Ethan J. Holloway submitted formal request for investigation into the Cedar Hill corruption case, Ref. Hartwell Vault, on May 3rd, 2005. His file includes coded field notes that match the findings within this vault. Though the case was closed due to insufficient jurisdiction, the department acknowledges the potential for judicial review should new evidence emerge." Ben looked up. He did it. He found it before he died. And now we have everything we need. Before they left the vault, Emma carefully photographed and scanned each document. They packed the most crucial items into waterproof containers. Liam found a side cabinet that contained Isaac's personal will, still sealed. It confirmed that Hartwell House and all assets within were to remain the property of the Hartwell line or its legal stewards, not any trust or development firm. When they emerged from the vault, the sun had begun to pierce the fog. The day had changed. Later that afternoon, Sarah Longley returned. She wore a heavy wool peacoat this time, glasses slipping down her nose. Her face, usually guarded, had a fire behind it. "They know," she said, not wasting a second. "I published a teaser. Vexley's lawyers sent a cease and desist within 2 hours, but I'm not backing down." Ben handed her a copy of the Army's letter and the photos of the share certificates. Her eyes widened. "This isn't just a story," she whispered. "This is a reckoning." By sundown, Emma's posts had gone viral. A trending hashtag, #Vault of Vindication. A legal crowdfunding campaign had begun, raising thousands in hours. Historians chimed in. Veterans groups began spreading Ethan's part of the story. And Valor, the dog who remembered, was suddenly more than a companion. He was a symbol. Ben stood on the porch of the mansion as the lights in town flickered on below. He felt Ethan beside him. He felt Isaac. And he felt hope. For the first time in a long time. The courtroom in the county seat of Ashridge was carved from heavy stone and years of old money. Its marble floors echoed with every step, The ceilings arched like the ribcage of some slumbering beast. Oil paintings of judges and donors lined the walnut-paneled walls, their eyes fixed in frozen judgment. Ben Holloway adjusted the collar of his borrowed blazer. It didn't quite fit, the sleeves a bit too short, the shoulders a little snug. But he stood tall. Beside him sat Sarah Longley, her hair braided tightly down her back, horn-rimmed glasses perched on her nose as she scrolled through her notes with the intensity of someone who'd spent their life chasing hidden truths. Emma, wearing her best thrift store dress, clutched a thick leather folder labeled Exhibits AG. Liam sat stiffly behind her, a nervous bundle in a pressed shirt. And Valor, Ben's faithful K9, graying now but steady, lay calmly at Ben's feet, his eyes scanning every movement in the room. Across the aisle, Vincent Graves leaned back in his chair. He was in his early 60s, sharp-suited and silver-haired, with the confident sneer of a man who had never lost anything he didn't want to. His features were clean-shaven, jawline square, and lips pressed in habitual calculation. He carried the Vexley family arrogance like a second skin. Next to him sat his attorney, Marla Greeley, a severe woman in a Navy power suit, lips painted in a color that suggested blood and business. Judge Margaret Tolliver, a woman in her late 50s with ash-blonde hair coiled into a bun and a gaze as sharp as glass, entered the chamber. Her voice was curt, practiced. "We are here to determine the legal ownership of the property known as Hartwell House and any assets contained within, based on new evidence presented by Mr. Benjamin Holloway." The opening arguments were dry, lineage disputes, contestations over deed transfers, but then Emma was called to the stand. With her voice calm and unwavering, she walked the court through each document. Isaac Hartwell's ledgers, Ethan Holloway's military request, the Army's letter confirming the investigation, the photographs of the vault and its contents. She held up a printed copy of Hartwell's will, bearing the original wax seal and signed date from 1930. The will, Emma said clearly, specifies that the Hartwell estate and all its contents are to remain within his bloodline, or those legally appointed as stewards of justice. The Vexley family, through Thomas and now Vincent, used shell companies to acquire the house illegally after framing Isaac. Vincent's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Sarah stood next, presenting Sarah style, with the fire of a woman who'd waited too long for someone to listen. She laid out decades of linked transactions, corporate records, and public corruption scandals that tied Vexley Holdings to at least 5 similar land acquisitions, all buried under legalese and paid silence. Graves's confident smirk faltered. Then came Ben. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I didn't even know who Isaac Hartwell was until the walls of that house started talking. But my brother, Ethan, he knew. He died trying to bring the truth to light. I'm not standing here for me, I'm standing for them. For the man buried by lies and the soldier who believed history should be honest." He paused, then looked down. "And I'm standing for him." The courtroom turned as Valor stood. Slowly, almost reverently, the old dog padded forward, his claws soft on the tile, and placed himself at Ben's side before sitting upright. There was something regal about him, even with his age showing, his ears alert, eyes steady. Judge Tolliver leaned forward. "This is the K9 mentioned in the military letter?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ben said. "He served with Ethan in Afghanistan. He was with him until the end. And he's the one who led us to every buried truth in that house. If there's any keeper of this legacy, it's him." A silence fell over the room. Several attendees in the gallery dabbed at their eyes. The judge didn't speak for a long moment. Then she nodded. "In the matter of Hartwell Estate versus Vexley Holdings, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Benjamin Holloway." Her gavel fell. Hartwell House and its contained assets, including the vault materials, are to be recognized as legal property of the Holloway family, in accordance with Isaac Hartwell's will and supplemental evidence. Furthermore, I am ordering the county to open a formal review of all land acquisitions under the Vexley Trust. Gasps spread through the room. Vincent Graves paled for the first time, his lips tightening. Marla Greeley leaned in, whispering furiously. Ben didn't hear any of it. He looked down at Valor. "We did it, old boy." After the hearing, the family stepped outside into bright winter sun. Press cameras clicked. Voices called out. But amid the whirlwind, a quiet moment passed when Emma opened her phone and read aloud an email just received. Congratulations, Emma Holloway. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as the first recipient of the Hartwell Holloway Legacy Scholarship. Your work in preserving public records and historical documentation has demonstrated exemplary dedication. We are honored to support your continued education. Emma blinked back tears. It's real. They named it after both of them. Ben hugged her, arms shaking slightly. Liam, for once, didn't joke. That evening, the lights inside Hartwell House glowed warm. The fire in the library hearth crackled. And above it, in a newly framed shadow box, hung Ethan's dog tag, beside one of Isaac's original blueprints, side by side. And beneath it, Valor slept in peace. 6 months had passed since the courtroom doors had closed, and the truth of Hartwell House had echoed through the halls of justice. Summer had come to Cedar Hill with a quiet grace, replacing the sharp winter frost with the golden warmth of July sun. Wildflowers now grew, where weeds had once choked the garden paths, and laughter returned to the air that had once been heavy with sorrow. The mansion, once a decaying relic of silence and scandal, stood proudly reborn atop the hill. Gone were the rotting floorboards and sagging beams. In their place stood polished oak, bright windows, and banners bearing the crest of the newly christened Hartwell Holloway Heritage Center. Inside, the past breathed again, not as a ghost, but as a guardian. Ben Holloway moved through the front gallery with a clipboard in hand. His beard now trimmed close, hair flecked with gray, but eyes sharp and light. His gait still held the steady fatigue of a man who'd spent years rebuilding from ruin. Not just brick and wood, but trust, memory, and meaning. Today was special. A tour group of veterans and students had just finished the archive room, where Isaac Hartwell's journals and Ethan Holloway's field letters were preserved under glass. Ben had watched them pause before the display of Valor's old military harness, his nameplate gleaming. Some whispered, some saluted. One woman wept. In the sunlit atrium, Emma, now 17, was showing visitors the touchscreen map she'd built, an interactive exhibit that let users trace the timeline of Hartwell's life, Vexley's fraud, and the family's journey to justice. She wore a navy polo with the museum's emblem over her heart. Her once sketch-smudged hands were now precise and graceful, the hands of someone who'd turned memory into map. In the back garden, Liam, ever the whirlwind, was organizing a scavenger hunt for children. His curly blonde hair had grown out a bit, giving him a wild halo. He wore khaki shorts, dirt smudged from setting up clues behind the hedges. Somewhere in the maze of bushes, his voice rang out. "Clue 5 is under the bird bath, but you didn't hear that from me." And lying on the stone porch like a noble statue in retirement was Valor. His muzzle had whitened further, his steps slower, but his spirit undimmed. Children often gathered around him, whispering stories or offering him treats, and he received them with the patience of a king who had nothing left to prove. The veterans always knelt beside him a little longer, hands resting gently on his shoulder, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a quiet, "Thank you." That afternoon, Ben received a letter delivered by hand, sealed in red wax bearing the symbol of a circle and flame. The messenger was a woman in her early 40s, with close-cropped silver hair, dark brown skin, and a calm gaze behind amber-rimmed glasses. She wore no name tag, just a dark charcoal suit and a silver ring shaped like a key. Her name was Adelaide Monroe, and she introduced herself simply. "We've been watching your work, Mr. Holloway," she said, "and more importantly, we've seen how you chose to honor what others would have hidden." Ben frowned gently. "Who's we?" She smiled. "The Stewardship Circle, a quiet network of historians, whistleblowers, and caretakers. Those who believe certain truths aren't meant to be buried. We guard stories that would otherwise be erased, and we believe Cedar Hill should be part of something bigger." Emma entered, eyes curious. "You mean more places like this?" Adelaide nodded. "Many. Lost hospitals, hidden vaults, wartime correspondence buried in attics. The world is full of stories waiting to be protected. We'd like you to join us." Ben looked at Emma, then toward the garden where Liam's laughter echoed. He thought of Ethan, of Isaac, of Valor. What would it mean? "It means you will be given access to information, support to preserve it, and invitations to help others do the same. You're not alone anymore, Mr. Holloway. Few get the chance to rebuild a legacy. Fewer still get to protect someone else's. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the estate in amber, the family gathered in the attic for routine cataloging. Liam had found an old compass in a cigar box. Emma, brushing dust from a set of wooden crates, stumbled upon a rolled-up linen bundle tucked beneath loose floorboards. It was another map. Unlike the others, this one was hand-drawn in blue ink, its edges singed, as if rescued from a fire. At the bottom was a signature Emma recognized instantly, Ethan's, and beneath it, the date, July 4th, 2006. Ben leaned over her shoulder. He left us something else. Emma smiled, her fingers tracing the path etched across the parchment. Looks like we're not done. Valor lifted his head at the sound of her voice, ears flicking forward. He didn't move, but his tail thumped twice against the floorboards, soft but sure. The mansion was no longer just a home, it was a beacon, and somewhere out there, the past was still whispering, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Sometimes, what seems like a crumbling house is just the shell of a miracle waiting to be revealed. Ben didn't ask for greatness. Emma never dreamed her sketches could rewrite history. Liam only wanted to make people smile. And Valor? He was just a dog, loyal to the end. But somehow, through faith, love, and a truth buried deep beneath old wood and silence, they found something bigger than themselves. They found redemption. They found purpose. And perhaps, just perhaps, God had a hand in that too. Maybe you've passed by your own Cedar Hill without knowing. Maybe the ruins in your life are just waiting for you to stop, listen, and believe. So, if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Comment below what miracles you're still waiting for. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story like this again. And above all, may God bless you and every house still standing on hope.